to the Fresh Squeeze Podcast.
Welcome to the Fresh Squeeze Podcast. If you want to know what my dick tastes like, ask Lance. How we doing tonight, y'all?
Damn,
We've got
dude.
joining us today.
Whoa.
He's lying.
Holy shit.
That is
Wow.
fake news.
Okay.
No, Dylan's lying. He's Omega Lion 75.
Damn
Anyway.
straight.
Man, we're
We
just
got
pitting
Lance,
everybody against each other.
We got Dylan, we got Jason, and we got me. The one guy who knows for a fact that Lance knows what my dick tastes like. Anyway.
I do not, actually.
What? Dang, dude. All right. Well, we have
You
a...
lost
Enough
thinking
about my
privileges.
I don't know about thinking privileges. I think
You
you're
lost
kind of
your
hogging
thinking
those.
privileges.
This has gotten spicy immediately. We're just like
Well, it
created
needs to
an
be
enemy of
spicy.
every. Okay, so we have an excellent podcast that is based on some history. Right, we're gonna be doing some badasses from history. I'm personally just rather excited about it. Is everybody else pretty stoked about this one?
Quite indeed, sir.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, I like history. I've always been a history buff.
There you go. There you go. Well,
Same here.
Even though you are quite skinny.
yeah.
Wop, 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 wah.
All right.
Rather be
Well,
skinny than round.
Hey, being round is good. It means I'm jolly.
ba-da-dum-bum-bum-bum. All right. So
All right.
our
Look
first
at Chad.
badass from history is actually one that Mike put together. So why don't we switch on over there and let us know who this badass is?
Works for me. But before we do that, let me ask you this, Jason. Hey, what's red and bad for your teeth?
Citric acid.
I don't know what color citric acid is, but the answer is a brick.
Ah, that would also be bad for my teeth.
Quite. But also red and bad for your teeth is probably Grace O'Malley. She's one of the most badass women in history, and she was and may Allah forgive me for using this word, a ginger. All right. So,
She's a ginger.
Grace O'Malley is celebrated in Ireland as the original pirate queen. She was a 16th century figure and a very remarkable leader, respected not only by her own people, but also by her sworn enemy, the English.
English.
Yeah.
Damn English.
All right. A little backstory on her. Her family got its start in Western Ireland in the early 1300s, while Henry VIII was still defying churches and beheading wives.
Henry the Eighth, I am.
I am. But unlike Anne Boleyn, Grace was not content to sit on her ass and be pampered. Hell no.
She don't need
She
no
picked
man.
up a saber and a flintlock and took testicles as castanets. Speaking hyperbolically, of course, her interest wasn't so much in family jewels as much as actual jewels.
There you go.
But that didn't stop her from having a few children. And if the tales are to be believed, she gave birth to one child in the middle of a naval battle, left the baby in the cabin of the ship, went outside, murdered a bunch of sailors, and then went back in to feed her baby.
She strangled him with the umbilical cord, didn't she?
Probably.
Going
And
commando.
I'm sure she used her flintlock to cut it.
She just like
Yeah.
attached a large ball with spikes on the end of it and just called it a Morning Star.
A hip-mounted flail.
Yes. Yes.
Like she jerked her hips at him and it's... Never mind. Other sources of the same story state that she fed the baby from her
Oh.
freckled ginger titties while fighting.
the
But
baby.
that seems a bit far-fetched.
Really?
Just a touch. I mean, a baby in the middle of a battle? I don't know about that.
Yeah, I'll have to agree. Especially a newborn. It
Yeah.
seems kind of impractical.
Not only impractical, but, I mean, still far-fetched as all hell.
Yeah.
It was
Either
the
way.
16th century. Look, they did things differently back then, okay? Like, there was a naval battle. Either, she went out there and fought or the baby died. I mean, she
Well,
didn't have
fair
a.
enough, but I mean, if
We're built different back then.
I mean, like even if she didn't go fight, what was she gonna do? Just sit there, wait for them to slaughter them? I mean, her water broke. They were fighting. Oops.
who knows,
What are you
she
gonna
could have
do?
done exactly
Park?
what possums do.
What was she
Like
gonna do? Park the ship on the curb and call a doctor?
probably.
She's just gonna be like, I had a baby.
She was Irish, not Scottish, first of all.
I mean,
Secondly,
close enough.
she could have did what opossums do and chuck the baby, because if she died, the baby would have died. So the baby might as well die so she could have another baby. Looking
Yeah,
like
but
a
like
true
she was
Republican.
just used to winning. I mean, if she was like this badass pirate queen, she knew she was gonna win because that's just what she did, right?
Yeah, I
But
mean,
any
she was a
pirate queen
winner.
worth their salt was not going to walk in assuming victory.
I
If you
mean, yeah,
assume victory, you're overconfident.
I've
Overconfidence
never
gets you
walked in.
killed.
You don't walk into a fight thinking you're gonna lose. That kind of mentality is just gonna make you lose.
Yeah, regardless of
I mean,
having a
you
baby.
just lose your fights, Lance. That's the difference between you and me. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. Anyway, Grace O'Malley's life was not without tragedy. After the death of her first husband, she took a lover from another fleet. That lover was killed by a rival band of pirates, all of whom she, according to legend, slaughtered personally. These deaths took place in Castle Duna, which earned her the most metal nickname of anyone ever, the Dark Lady of Duna.
There you go.
Ooh, yeah.
That's ominous. That's ominous.
Very. But this woman had such brass balls that when she was granted a safe audience with the Queen Elizabeth of England, she refused to bow because, in her mind, she too was a queen. That's a line for a fucking movie. Get on it, Hollywood.
There you go. Hell yeah.
Rather hilariously, she was not one to skip telling off her own family either. And it is recorded in actual history that she berated her own son for being cowardly during a battle by yelling out, "Are you trying to hide in my arse, the place that you came out of?" Except
Oh,
she,
he's a shit baby. It's a
Damn.
butt baby.
except she yelled it in Irish.
Baby.
Butt baby.
Dang, dude.
A butt baby. A butt baby. that makes me giggle sometimes when I hear butt baby. Either
Fuck,
way,
baby.
she yelled it in Irish, though, which is the most infuriatingly confusing language. So,
Gaelic.
Irish, not Gaelic. Irish and Gaelic are two very different languages. Gaelic is Proto-Irish, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah, Gaelic fell out of common usage in the 1400s, I believe. But either way, it's an infuriatingly confusing language. So I'm sure it sounded hilarious in her mother tongue. Just saying. For instance, Jason, do me a
What?
favor real quick.
What?
Got a pen and paper?
No, I don't.
Well, shit.
In 2022, come on.
In front of a computer?
Okay,
Like, what?
Lance,
Why do I have to have
pull
a
up a
pen?
Word document real quick. Just humor me real quick. Pull up a Word document or a notepad or something.
I mean, I'm looking directly at the
Alright, I
at
have
the
a-
stream doc. I'm just saying.
I
While
have a
you
Word
are,
document open.
Go ahead. Type in the following letters: CIA OMHE.
GIAOM.
CIA.
Oh, CIA.
Yeah, CIA OMHE.
Like Stun Smith.
GIAOMHE. Kyom Hey? I don't know how.
That is a genuine Irish name that is still in use to this day, and it is relatively popular in County Cork.
Is that
Try to pronounce
pronounced
it.
Kyom
Definitely
Hey?
can't see that.
It is
There we go.
not.
CIAOMHE, you said?
Yep, that is a fairly common girl's name in Ireland today.
How do you
Bonus
pronounce it? 'Cause
Brownie
I would
points to
butcher it.
any of you who can pronounce it, and you are going to be pissed at me when I tell you how you do pronounce it.
Comhe. No.
Come on, Dylan, give it a shot.
I actually can't see it.
You can't see
You're
it?
not
See it?
looking at you're not looking at the stream?
I'm
See
seeing
him,
it's on the
Hay?
stream right now.
Yeah,
We have one viewer, and I think it's me.
probably.
Because I've got the stream pulled up, and we have one viewer. So.
And he's limited because I think he's on. Yeah. But yeah,
I'll just go ahead and say it. That name is pronounced Quiva.
Quiva?
Quiva.
I want to know how the fuck their letters work.
Exactly.
see, I can see now why her face is so angry right now. Like
She wants to shoot that name out of the air. Or she's got two guys hunting that floating pair of boxer briefs. I'm gonna get you, tighty whities. Today I am.
It looks like she's about to make a queef.
A little bit.
she's like, I just had a baby.
All right. Anyway, despite all this fun stuff and the idiotic language that they spoke back in those days, she lived until the age of about 72 or 73, depending on your source. And she died of natural causes in 1603 in her home at Rockfleet Castle.
There you go.
Comfortably, might I add, surrounded by servants, feasts, and all the male concubines you can imagine, probably.
Probably.
So we've got some
Is that-
supporting a supporting video here to kind of just fill in the gaps. So let's give that a look.
Well, before
In the
you do
1500s
that,
Go ahead. You are muted right now. Mike, we can't hear you.
oh,
There you go. We can hear you now.
okay. I was
He
just going to
died.
say she has a bronze statue of herself erected in Ireland, and she is considered an Irish folk hero to many Irishmen and women to this day.
I can believe that. Are we
Mhm.
ready for the video?
Bring it on.
In the 1500s, the seas of Ireland were controlled by a fearsome and powerful pirate woman. Her name was Grace O'Malley. Today we will learn how Grace defied English rule, drove away slave ships, and became one of Ireland's greatest ever fighters. This is
All
Knowledge
this
Voyage.
despite being a genge.
But before this video starts, don't forget to hit subscribe and
Having a
hit the
baby
bell
come
so
out
that you
of
can get
eyes.
all of our weekly videos about history.
I was going to
Thank
say,
you.
this is on Knowledge Voyage. Be sure to give them a subscribe.
In the 1500s, Ireland was occupied by England. England was ruled by its fire-haired Queen Elizabeth I. But on the other
Ah, it's another
Fire
ginger right there.
Ew. Gross.
Just saying.
Firehead.
You're gonna see a lot of fucking gingers in an Irish fucking video.
I mean,
Oh,
you
man.
see some girls walking around wearing those neck chokers to show that they have a daddy. And she is just showing off.
I thought she was just trying to make everybody think that she's a venomous snake, but
Or a
Other
Maybe
side of
she's
the
a grandmaster.
I'm a
at DJ.
snake, a sneaky, sneaky snake.
snake.
That video's a fucking classic. I don't care who you are.
All right, let's give her a look here.
Queen Elizabeth I. But on the other side of the Irish Sea
You
was
putting hot
another
sauce on
redhead
something right now? What the fuck?
Tahine, actually. It's powder.
Okay, there you go.
Chili lime
Carving out
powder,
her-
and it goes on fucking everything. This is a cheeseburger.
Cheeseburger.
own
Cheeseburger.
domain on the high seas, and her name was Grace O'Malley. Grace O'Malley was born in
Almost guaranteed she was not that attractive.
I was
Just
gonna
saying.
think. I was
Absolutely
just
not.
thinking that.
Wasn't there like all of these movies with, like, for example, Joan of Arc, which, by the way, we didn't even make her a badass of history today. But
Honorable
like Joan
mention.
of Arc was notoriously not very attractive at all, but anyway.
Man, neither was Pocahontas. Also, she was 12.
Ooh.
Nope.
So I don't think I would want to. Well, wait a minute. She's fucking dead, so she's definitely not 12. But what
She
you're
was
saying with the
12
story
at the time.
at
At
the
the
story.
time of her famed stories.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
she was 12 years old and married off to another guy named John from England, not John Smith.
Yeah.
Contrary to popular belief. Tangent over.
Wasn't
Let's
John?
watch this.
Look,
Ginger.
Everybody was named John in England at that time, okay?
Probably.
Mayo to an Irish noble family who had lost power and land to the English. But Grace would make up for it by carving out her own empire on the sea. Her piracy was not just to terrify her opponents, but also to protect her community. Ireland, like most of Europe at the time, was often raided by Islamic slave raiders from the Barbary coast. They came to kidnap young blonde and red-haired women, as they were highly sought out of the Ottoman court harems. Ireland was targeted due to its many red-haired women, but Grace O'Malley made sure there was one red-haired woman the Barbary slave raiders would regret meeting. Whilst at sea, Grace fell into labour, and within hours of giving birth to her son, Barbary pirates attacked her ship. But Grace was a fearsome fighter. Rather than hide, she burst out of the hull, blazing her pistols and roaring defiance. She shot the slave raiders' commanders and rallied her crew to fight off the remaining invaders. This tale of a terrifying red-haired female pirate was passed along Barbary slave raiders, who wisely avoided Ireland during her control.
See? Badass of history right there.
As a result, she saved countless women and girls from enslavement. But Grace was only getting started. The English were trying to tighten their control on Ireland, and Grace had a plan to fight back. Using the inlets in Western Ireland's coast, she launched multiple pirate raids on English ships, shattering their resolve and seizing supplies and gold. She became deeply feared amongst English sailors, but rather than be angry, England's Queen Elizabeth I couldn't help but admire this enemy. They had much in common. They were both
She's all like, nice, bruv.
Both about the same age. They had both defied odds and thrived in a man's world.
I'm just saying, she doesn't even have red hair, so why are you even showing her? Honestly.
He's a blonde!
That's a different one, probably.
Ow, my immersion. Ow.
And they both had the allegiance of their subjects and were used to winning. In
You ever
1593,
notice how in
Grace
some
O'Malley
shows they'll like replace an actor midway through a season?
I mean, that happens pretty often, yeah.
Also, the whole Iron Man debacle with Colonel Rhodes.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
was
In
invited
this
to
case,
negotiate
they
with Queen.
exchanged a ginger for a blonde, so massive upgrade.
I mean, this is a 3-minute video, so seems kind of silly.
A little silly to swap out the actress.
Yeah.
O'Malley was
Maybe
invited
she
to
went Super
negotiate with Queen.
Saiyan.
Allegiance to their subjects and were used to winning. In 1593, Grace O'Malley was invited to negotiate with Queen Elizabeth I at Greenwich Palace in London. The meeting went well. Grace refused to bow, and when Elizabeth offered her a title, she refused
to bow.
When asked why she hadn't bowed,
She's like, fuck you, bitch. I ain't bowing. I bow to no one. I'm Grace O'Malley.
or accepted a title, Grace explained that she too was a queen and couldn't accept such behaviour from an equal. And rather than be offended,
There she is. Now, she's like getting more venomous as we move along here. That's definitely
Not even venom. She is morphing into a galaxy.
She's trying to be like fucking Popeye right now. Look at those freaking
Dude,
forearms.
she's holding the freaking world in her hand.
I'm Popeye the English Queen.
Oh.
Elizabeth I was actually deeply impressed. Thanks to this show of strength,
She literally was just all like, fuck you, bitch. And she's like, wow, impressive.
Hey, I'm backing
Elizabeth
up a little
negotiated-
bit to that still image real quick. Ladies and gentlemen, this was considered the height of fashion, circa 1600.
I mean, little does everybody
Let that
know
sink in.
that her arms were actually just that fat, and that's not actually stuffing in her dress.
Yeah, that wasn't stuffing, and that was not for fashion. That was function.
Yeah. She could not bend her arms because they were so fat.
She's so swole.
Damn,
And-
she's swole.
That's from fucking carrying the kingdom for so long, you know? Like,
Yeah.
She was
Rather
the
than be
original Giga Chad.
Oh, God.
and rather than be offended, Queen Elizabeth I was actually deeply impressed. Thanks to this show of strength, Elizabeth negotiated a treaty that retained the O'Malley clan's independence and agreed to release one of Grace's sons from an English jail. In short, Grace was a force of nature. Grace O'Malley was a ferocious warrior and terrorized her opponents at sea. She was also a powerful diplomat, swaggering into the palace of her sworn enemy
There you
and
go.
displaying such strength and confidence that she obtained extraordinary concessions. In short, Grace O'Malley was a true Irish warrior heroine and even today is known as Ireland's pirate queen.
Thanks for watching.
there you go. There you go.
Yep.
That was it right there. Grace O'Malley,
If only she wasn't a ginger, I would.
the pirate queen. So any final thoughts on Grace? Definitely deserving of badass of history, for sure.
Another little known fact about this weirdly obscure personage from history. She is the reason that saying your prayers before dinner is called saying grace.
Oh,
Very well.
You thank Grace O'Malley for not taking the food right out from under you.
Well, there you go. So,
I did not know that.
I mean, I don't know if that's true or not, but probably.
Oh,
could be a legend.
Probably.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic off to Jason.
Absolutely. So, probably in the middle of this, I just thought I would let the people of the stream know that Mike has to step away for a few minutes.
Not just yet. I can stay a little longer.
I'm just saying in 9 minutes, but that's fine.
Oh, okay.
Just wanted to let everybody know he has to go do something. He will be back, but I will continue on as though Mike has never left. So,
You do anyway.
you're right. You're right. So, the first badass of history that I want to talk about is Nikola Tesla.
Dun.
Now, I know that you've probably heard of the car company Tesla, but make no mistake that Nikola Tesla, the genius that brought us the current standard for electrical power generation across the world, is far greater than anything anything Elon Musk will ever do, or has
And
done,
the
for that
actual-
matter. It looks like we might have lost.
Inventor of the light bulb.
We might have lost Lance. Are you still there, Lance? Or Catonic?
Oh.
Well, we'll just keep going. The show must go on.
The show must go on indeed, but I do want to say, Dylan, you are wrong. He is not the original inventor of the light bulb. The original
can you hear
inventor...
me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh,
My
we can
screen
hear you,
stopped.
yes.
Okay. It was buffering
are.
and everything was just
We can
moving
see
in
ya.
circles.
You're good now.
Okay,
Alright.
you are back. So let's continue on.
I don't see my camera on the stream though.
I just wanted to correct Dylan there real
There's
quick.
a delay. You're back.
Nikola
Okay.
Tesla was not credited with in any way, shape, or form with the invention of the light bulb. He invented better power techniques than Edison did to power the light bulbs that he invented, although the light bulb was a stolen invention.
Oh,
Agreed.
Huh.
But we're not. We're getting on a little bit of a tangent. But
it's still poignant.
so I'm probably going to mess up this town name, but regardless of that, Nikola Tesla was born in 1856 in Smiljan, Croatia.
Million.
Croatia. Smiljan, Croatia.
Million.
It's apparently located 6 kilometers northwest of Gospic and 15 kilometers from the Zagreb Split Highway. Have it up there on the map. I'll zoom out a little bit so you can kind of see where it's at in the world. It's across the way from Italy in Croatia. So, Tesla studied math and physics at the Technical University of Graz and philosophy at the University of Prague. In 1882, while on a walk, he came up with the idea of a brushless AC motor. AC meaning alternating current, which is different than what Edison was doing. So Edison was all direct current, and we'll get into this of why AC is better for our standard than what DC is. But
Also, without these two men, we would not have the most overrated rock band in the world, AC/DC.
well, there you go. Definitely overrated. But anyway, so he came up with the idea for a brushless AC motor, making the first sketches of its rotating electromagnets in the sand of the path that he was walking on. So just give you an idea of what he was drawing here. And the
Sorry, I
main
don't
thing,
speak robot.
so the way that this ends up working is that overall the and maybe I can do the draw box. Oh, I can't because I didn't add it in. But essentially, AC works in such a way that it goes to in a sine wave, and I'm kind of trying to draw it on here in an imaginary way, from positive to negative and it has usually multiple phases, so that this rotating component is constantly being subject to positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, which then pushes it around in a circle. And you can use the same concept to create a generator, which the generator can obviously create voltage. So anyway, he came up with this as he was on a walk, and that is the main way that we in industry make all kinds of things. We pump things with electric motors. We do all kinds of stuff with electric motors. But anyway, continuing on, later that year, he moved to Paris and got a job repairing direct current power plants, or DC, with the Continental Edison Company. 2 years later, he immigrated to the United States. Tesla arrived in New York in 1884 and was hired as an engineer at Thomas Edison's Manhattan headquarters. He worked there for a year, impressing Edison with his diligence and ingenuity. At one point, Edison told Tesla he would pay $50,000, which in today's money would be over $1 million. I think it's like $1.1 million, somewhere in that range, for an improved design for his DC dynamos. So let's take a quick look at what this dynamo looks like. There's no sound in this video, but this is a DC dynamo, or we call them generators now. They're kind of just rotating this, I assume, in SolidWorks or some sort of a 3D modeling software.
Just to give you exact figures here, $50,000 in 1888 is $1,538,400 today.
That is quite a bit.
Oh, inflation.
Indeed.
So after months of experimentation, Tesla presented a solution and asked for the money. Edison demurred, saying, "Tesla, you don't understand American humor." So I have a quick clip here.
And then he kept the money and the invention anyway.
Why, of course. I have
Because
a bit of a
America.
clip here that kind of explains
Was
this.
hired by Thomas Edison to do basic electrical engineering, but moved up to redesigning the direct current generators that ran Edison's business. Edison offered Tesla $50,000, or about $1.1 million in today's currency, to make these improvements. After completing this assignment, Tesla asked about the payment for his work. Edison didn't pay out the money. He claimed that he wasn't serious about the payment, that Tesla didn't understand American humor. Tesla eventually left Edison's company and partnered with George Westinghouse in 1888 to commercialize his system of alternating current. The problem here is that alternating current competed with direct current, which Thomas Edison built his entire monopoly on. Thus began the War of the Currents.
So we're going to talk briefly here
War of the Currents.
about the War of the Currents, or the Battle of the
Sounds
Currents.
badass. Just
So in 1887 and 1888, Tesla was granted more than 30 patents for his inventions and was invited to address the American Institute for Electrical Engineers on his work. His lecture caught the attention of, like he said in the video there, George Westinghouse, the inventor who had launched the first AC power system near Boston and was Edison's major competitor in, like he said there, the Battle of the Currents. Westinghouse obviously hired Tesla, licensed the patents for his AC motor, and gave him his own lab. In 1890, Edison arranged for a convicted New York murderer, and this is Edison, obviously. He wanted to try to sway the public into not wanting AC, right? So he actually arranged for a convicted New York murderer to be put to death on an AC-powered electric chair, a stunt designed to show how dangerous the Westinghouse standard could be. So we shall give a quick look at some of Edison's sabotage.
On that note, I'm going to take my leave for a moment. I should be back in about 20.
All right, sounds good.
I'll see y'all shortly.
Everybody assumed that Edison would get the contract to wire it and to power the first World's Fair powered by electricity.
Actually, let's go back to that other view. Hold on. Because the other one, really kind of shows a little bit of the sabotage here. Let me skip forward a little bit.
Went so far as to electrocute a circus elephant in public. An alternating current, trying to scare people away from using it. He spread false information about it, lobbied against its use, and went so far as to electrocute a circus elephant in public. Basically, Edison was a jerk. Direct current had plenty of its own faults. It was the cause of death of countless children and created numerous house fires. Also, the maximum reach of direct current was about 2 miles, which meant a substation had to be built to continue the current.
Hey guys, I'm
To
having
this day,
some
they would
serious
still be
internet
building
issues.
substations if
I'm
they...
gonna get that fixed real quick. It's gonna require me just rebooting something real quick. My thing keeps on popping in and out.
Okay. We're just going to
5,
continue on,
10.
man.
All right, yeah, just continue on. I'll probably be back before you're done with this.
They were going to get electricity across the U.S. Tesla's alternating current could go for hundreds of miles. Lights running on alternate current were bright white, unlike dull yellow lights running on direct current. Eventually, Edison had to give in to the demands of the people and had to go with alternating current. Tesla's influence spreads much further than electricity. He had over 700 patents and came up with ideas such as robots, spark plugs, the electric arc lamp, an X-ray device, bladeless turbines, wireless communication, laser technology, neon lights, remote control, cellular communication, radio, an electrical bath to remove germs, radar, and much more. Tesla died from heart failure in a room of the New Yorker Hotel on January...
Which we'll get onto that in a bit. But let's, so essentially there was this, I guess there was this large exposition that was done in Chicago, and it was called the World's Fair. And this next video goes over and talks about how Tesla and also Westinghouse were given that contract. So let's give that a look.
And to everyone's surprise, Westinghouse, using Tesla's patents, won the contract. And I think to really appreciate how important that moment was, you have to think back to what it was like at that time. The only way to light your home was with a candle or with a gas lamp. So you come to the World's Fair and flash, I mean, literally 100,000 light bulbs lit up. I mean, nothing like this had ever been seen before. It was...
I invite everybody, by the way, I've read a book on the World's Fair that also has like another section that is a work of fiction. Well, it's historical fiction. It's called The Devil in the White City. Excellent book, by the way. But essentially, half of the book is talking about the engineering feat of the World Fair, or the World's Fair, of this same exact time. And essentially, not only was it this engineering feat for Tesla and for Westinghouse to light the fair, there was also this huge breakthrough in architectural engineering, where the majority of the area that all of these buildings that you see here were built was on kind of sandy and swampy ground. So they developed this method that is still used today. And they essentially built these, or they drilled down into the kind of like sandy earth and created these just pillars of concrete to support the foundations of these buildings, which was kind of interesting because actually these buildings were torn down. They weren't even permanent buildings. They built all of this just for this World's Fair, and then it wasn't even like 5 or 10 years later, it was already back to, you know, and who knows, maybe they ended up building other buildings after that. But this whole World's Fair was torn down shortly after the World's Fair was over. They didn't even keep it there.
Cool.
And so Couch Potato Gaming, thanks for joining us. Yeah, we're talking about the Battle of the Currents, and just kind of like we're to the point right now where we're talking about Nikola Tesla and his life, and he's one of the badasses of history that we're talking about. But I just wanted to bring up a few points that I had read, this book called The Devil in the White City, that goes into a lot of detail into the World's Fair. So let's keep on with this.
Truly transformational.
By the time Thomas Edison returned from the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, he was in a rage. He counterattacked Tesla's success by launching a brutal smear campaign, one of the nastiest in the history of American industry.
Edison had already lost, but he didn't accept it.
Edison published pamphlets that warned about the dangers of AC power. His associates electrocuted dogs and horses and even an elephant on the streets of New York to try to convince people that AC power was too dangerous and should not be used.
In addition to executing animals, Edison promoted the idea of an AC-powered electric chair to provoke fear about the dangers of Tesla's AC current.
Complete fucking ridiculous.
But the campaign of terror could not derail the brilliance of Tesla's work. Undeterred and in possession of the superior technology, Westinghouse and Tesla set out to light America. To do that, they needed a power source, and Tesla had an audacious one in mind. He wanted to harness the power of Niagara Falls and ship it south to Buffalo, New York.
What they essentially did was carve 100-foot vertical shafts in the rocks for water to fall down and then spin turbine blades and create electricity. He started with 8 million volts there, which at the time was considered astounding.
The plant opened on August 25, 1895, and provided power until it was shut down in 1961 to make room for its successor just a few miles down the river. But the basic solutions Tesla came up with are still in use today.
Yep, we still use many of those solutions today. And so just to kind of like continue on with some of the inventions, so he invented electric oscillators, meters, improved lights, and the high voltage transformer known as the Tesla coil. He also experimented with X-rays, gave short-range demonstrations of radio communication 2 years before, and I might mess up this name here, but Guglielmo Marconi, and piloted a radio-controlled boat around a pool in Madison Square Garden. So if you don't know what an oscillator is, this is what's called the earthquake machine. And it's quite interesting. So let's give that a look.
The Tesla earthquake machine was a mechanical oscillator, which is basically a machine that produces vibrations. And by producing these vibrations, the machine could be made to resonate with different structures.
The oscillator machine is based on the principle that every substance, when stimulated, has a resonant frequency. If the frequency is matched and amplified by an outside force, such as the oscillator machine, any material can be literally shaken to pieces. The destruction
Hopefully
of the
it's
Tacoma
working
Narrows
better now. I
Bridge
do
in Washington in
apologize. Messed with the
1940
antennas on the extender.
No, you're fine. We're looking at oscillator machines right now.
demonstrated this principle. The winds whipping around the bridge hit just the right frequency, causing the steel bridge to sway violently in a rhythmic pattern that finally broke it apart.
Got him.
To demonstrate the power of resonance, we're going to see what happens to a wine glass as it vibrates to its breaking point. First, I'll start the glass vibrating and use a microphone connected to an oscilloscope to see what frequency the glass vibrates at. I'll then set that frequency on a signal generator, which is going to play it back through an amplifier into a speaker. Because the glass is going to be moving more than 400 times per second, we will be using a strobe light in order to slow down the motion. Now, this is going to be loud, so I have to wear some protection. As the vibrations increase in intensity, the glass will start to move more and more, and eventually it can't take it anymore. So as I turn up the volume, the glass will break.
I'm going to turn this down just a little bit. Look at that glass. Boom.
So what we saw was like a mini earthquake, and Tesla's earthquake machine would be able to do this, but on a much larger scale.
So that was one of his inventions as well. So
That literally shook apart steel, one of the most
Right.
densest metal known to man.
Right. And so, like, another one of his really awesome inventions here. Oh, why is
In the
Spotify
1800s.
popping
That's
up?
what's really impressive. He did all this in the 1800s.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So let's
wow.
check this out. The famous Tesla coil. So just giving you an idea here, this was over 3 million volts that they're testing this Tesla coil here. Look at that. Just for scale, like you can see down over at the bottom here, of course now the bar is covering it up, but that's how tiny the people are. They're only probably like 50 to 60 feet away from this. So like this is how gigantic this this Tesla coil is. This is just the first test, and they have another one. It comes up and they show So this is where they show this spot. So if you know basic electricity, all electricity is looking for a pathway to ground. So the way that Tesla was able to have all of these famous photos of him sitting by, you know, these Tesla coils with all of this kind of lightning essentially going around him is that he was right next to a ground. And this here is kind of showing here that this paper doll or whatever is completely protected by this umbrella that is a direct pathway to ground. So let's give that a look. Anybody in chat, would you come over and stand under there? Would you feel safe? And then this is the final 210,000 watts. Freaking crazy. So, just something, if people are wondering, it's like, what's the overall point, right? What's the point of the Tesla coil? So, just as a brief explanation here, Tesla was able to demonstrate that you can actually transmit electricity throughout the air. Like, he had many famous demonstrations where he was holding a light bulb in his hand while he was transmitting voltage through the air, and the light bulb, while holding it in his hand, would light up. And this was particularly dangerous to all of those people who and companies that transmitted, you know, all of the electricity to various households in the same way that we do that today. So there was a lot of sabotage to essentially try to just make Tesla seem to be a fraud, right? He wanted to give this to everybody for free. He wanted to give these technologies to people for free. Well, in a capitalist society, that doesn't work very well. So
no, because that's communism.
right? And I'm just saying that Tesla really in his whole entire life did not benefit very much from his technologies. And this is kind of a theme in the badasses that I chose personally from history, because all of the badasses that I chose from history, well, I guess it's just two, but even beyond what I'm going to present today, those people did it for the sake of doing it. They didn't do it for profit. They didn't do it because they wanted the renown or the fame. They did it because it would help the world, and they weren't looking at it from a profit perspective. They just wanted to make the world a better place. So, just in conclusion here, to me, that makes you the biggest badass, right? Like, to me, and I'm just saying it's opinion. I get it. But that makes you an extreme badass to want to do something to just make the world better, instead of doing something for fame or doing it for renown or doing it for money. Just doing it for the sake of doing it and being a good person.
Well, that, I mean, and he made, I mean, these inventions that he made led to a huge tree, a sprouting tree of many other things.
Right.
And like what Mike said, you know, we wouldn't have a lot of this stuff today, because if it weren't for Nikola Tesla's work. But
Right.
yeah, what I did not know, though, I didn't realize that Thomas Edison was that elaborate to
Oh, yeah.
sabotage him.
Definitely.
I thought I was under the impression that he just stole his idea, because, like you said, capitalist society,
Right.
and then given, all that kind of junk. But I didn't realize that he, like, actually, like, legitimately made a smear campaign, and also executed animals just to make his inventions look like they're made for mass destruction and loss of life, which is
Yep.
completely, which it's just like technology. Technology is not the one that's destroying society; it's humans themselves doing it.
Right. But
America.
yeah, and I agree with
That's
all of your
American thing.
sentiments there. But just to conclude here, so moving on, in 1895, Tesla's New York lab burned, destroying years worth of notes and equipment. And this is known as a complete and utter travesty in the scientific community. There were so many things that we lost in that fire. Like, I don't know that it's as big of a loss as, say, the burning of the Library of Alexandria, which we'll get into later with Lance's or Catonic subject.
I actually know about that one.
But yeah, like, this was a major loss. So many inventions that would have benefited society today, even, and would have pushed us further in technology, were lost that day. But he secured backing after, so he returned to New York in 1900 by J.P. Morgan and began building a global communications network centered on a giant tower at Wardenclyffe in Long Island. But funds ran out, and Morgan balked at Tesla's grandiose schemes. Tesla lived his last decades in a New York hotel, working on new inventions, even as his energy and mental health faded. His obsession with the number 3 and fastidious washing were dismissed by the eccentricities of genius. He spent his final years feeding, and he claimed communicating with, the city's pigeons. So kind of a very sad end to a complete and utter badass of history. That is all I have today on Nikola Tesla. So, Dylan, are you wanting to go over our next badass of history?
Mm-hmm. So what I wish to talk about is a woman named Margaret Hamilton. So we got another woman that's living in a time where, women don't exactly have a lot of say in a lot of autonomy back in her time period, but because of the talents that she has, and because of her knowledge, that society, that kind of societal oppression, just couldn't stop her. So On July 20th, 1969, a lunar module, Eagle, was approaching the moon's surface. Its computers began flashing warning messages. For a moment, Mission Control forced a go, no-go decision, but with high confidence in the software developed computer scientist Margaret Hamilton and her team, they told astronauts to proceed. The software, which allowed the computer to recognize error messages and ignore low priority tasks, continued to guide the astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin over the crater-pocked, dusty crust of the moon to their landing. It became quite clear, she later said, that the software was not only informing everyone that there was a hardware-related problem, but the software was compensating for it. An investigation would eventually show that the astronauts' checklist was at fault, telling them to set the rendezvous radar hardware switch incorrectly. Fortunately, the people at Mission Control trusted our software, end quote, Hamilton said. And only enough fuel for 30 more seconds of flight, Neil Armstrong reported, the Eagle has landed. The achievement was a monumental task at a time when computer technology was in its infancy. The astronauts had access to only 72 kilobytes of computer memory. A 64 gigabyte cell phone today carries almost a million times more storage space. Yeah, don't ever underestimate the power of today's cell phones.
Right.
They're Superman compared to these computers.
Exactly.
Programmers had to use paper punch cards to feed information into room-sized computers with no interface. As the landing occurred, Hamilton, then at age 32, was hooked up to Mission Control from MIT. I was not concentrating on the mission per se, Hamilton confessed. I was concentrating on the software. After everything worked properly, the weight of the moment hit her. My God, look what happened. We did it. It worked. It was exciting. Hamilton, who popularized the term software engineering, took chitting for it. Critics said that it inflated her work importance, but today, when software engineers represent a fervently sought-after segment of the workforce, no one is laughing at Margaret Hamilton.
Exactly.
So here's a little picture here.
I'm going to pull that up here for you.
Yeah, if you can do that, please.
So this was the printout of everything that was going on there. I don't know that we're necessarily supposed to understand that, but that's how it looks like there. So let's see, state vector. That's got to be just navigation type calculations there. Some of them, it's kind of difficult to discern based on what they named the variables, what each one of those are. But I imagine it's calculus, and they're trying to move the spacecraft in such a way so as to put it on the correct trajectory of where it's going. Looks like time variable, RSS, RX. They're doing vectors there, it looks like. Looks like it has a printout of what its current position is. See, I see apogee is something that I've seen in Kerbal Space Program. Perigee is, another angle. They've got azimuth, elevation, range. So yeah, all of these were studied. And of course, it's put into the computer, but they had all of these printouts, and that's how they had to determine, or what they used to determine if the program was working correctly. Pretty neat.
Oof. I don't know how I could comprehend any of that. All right. Anyways, when the Apollo missions were planned, the process of writing code began on large sheets of paper.
I'll be right back.
A key punch operator would create holes in paper cards, keying the codes into what were called punch cards. Not too many people know what punch cards are anymore, but that's how you programmed it, says Paul Cerrucci, a curator of the Emeritus in the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum, who has known Hamilton for the past 2 decades. The museum holds in its collection the Apollo Flight Guidance Computer Software Collection created by Hamilton herself. The archival material includes printout sheets known as the listings, which shows results of guidance equation calculations. When the computer's output identified no problems, software engineers would quote unquote eyeball the listings, verifying that no issues required attention. Once everything looked up to snuff, the code was sent to a Raytheon factory where mostly women, many of them former employees of New England textile mills, wove copper wires and magnetic cores into a long rope of wire. With coding written on in ones and zeros, the wire went through the tiny magnetic core when it represented a 1, and when it ran around the core when it represented a 0. This ingenious process created a rope that carried software instructions. The women who did the work were known as LOL. Hamilton told Carusi, not because they were funny, it was short for little old ladies. Hamilton was called Rope Mother.
Here's another picture of her over in the, I'm assuming, the simulation cockpit.
Wow. Just wow. Man. The rope compensated for the Apollo's computer's limited memory. The process created a quote-unquote a very robust system, according to Tizo Harmony, a curator at the Air and Space Museum and author of the new book, Apollo to the Moon: A History in 50 Objects. That was once one of the single reasons why Apollo guidance computer worked flawlessly throughout every single mission. A math lover from an early age, Hamilton transformed that affinity, becoming an expert software writing and engineering following her departure from college. When her husband was attending law school at Harvard in 1959, she took a job at MIT, learning to write software that could predict the weather. A year later, she began programming systems to locate enemy aircraft in the Semi-Automatic Ground Environment, or SAGE, program. It was in the mid-1960s that Hamilton heard that MIT had announced that they were looking for people to do programming to send man to the moon. And I just thought, wow, I got to go there, end quote.
Obviously.
She had, right. She had planned to begin graduate school at Brandeis University for a degree in abstract math, but the U.S. space program won her heart. Thanks to the success of her work at SAGE, she was the first programmer hired at the Apollo project at MIT. In 1965, she became head of her own team at the MIT Instrumentation Laboratory, later known as Draper Laboratory, which was dedicated to writing and testing software for Apollo 11's two 70-pound computers, one aboard the command module Columbia and one abroad in the lunar module Eagle. And that's her getting a medal from former President Barack Obama. Yeah. And for those who are not...
Yeah, I was going to say, I can continue on the rest of it here, but go ahead.
And for those of you who don't exactly understand why why our technology today seems to be smaller, but yet they seem to be more expensive. It's actually, I learned this in math during my undergrad years from my algebra teacher, who was also an engineer, and I think he was a military guy. I know he was. I can't remember what branch though, but he was an engineer. He was absolutely amazing to learn from. Very, very good at math. He was a martial artist too, and me and him clicked because I myself was a martial artist back in my high school and middle school days. And that's where I learned that computers, when they were first, we're in its infancy, the computers used to be gigantic. They were heavy. They were massive. Oh, yeah. And it took so much material to make, and that's the reason why now, actually, if you compare today's technology, like this phone right here, or the computer that I'm doing this stream on right now, is actually a lot less expensive than the computers back in that era, because this requires less material to make, And not to mention, and the why it takes us to make is because of because like she said, the software is compensating. The software is doing the work. And not to mention, a lot of times, software is so advanced today that if there should be a bug, a glitch, or any sort of anything that would make your device act, not right, a lot of times it can fix itself, or by doing certain commands, it can also be repaired like that.
Sure.
And yeah, and like I said, and like I said before, those computers were huge as hell, but they are nowhere as powerful as a smartphone.
Well, yeah, and
These little guys are like Superman times 50 compared to those big giganto computers back in the 60s and 70s.
well, yeah. So like in the old days when they were so as many people probably know, computers work off of ones and zeros. So what they were using in those old days were often vacuum tubes. These gigantic, I mean, they weren't gigantic, but by today's standards, they absolutely are gigantic in comparison. And that the only purpose of those vacuum tubes was to either represent a one, or if it was off, a zero. And the advancements that we see today, and the large difference in size, is really because of our engineering feats of creating smaller and smaller transistors and being able to pack more transistors into a smaller space. So yeah, it's all obviously driven. Software has greatly improved over the years, but the hardware side has also greatly improved to help along that software as well.
Well, yeah, and isn't software starting to have more like adapt adaptive abilities and like artificial intelligence now? Because I mean, I know it's still in proto, don't get me wrong. I mean, this isn't Star Wars or anything, I know this, but but like I know like we're in experimentation of creating AI or artificial intelligence or adaptive AI. Like that's pretty much where software is at now,
So
isn't it?
so Shuluby Snack, it's too bad he's not on today, but he would have quite a bit of an opinion on this. We've had a number of conversations. So when the industry today says AI, it's not really actually like artificial general intelligence. The only thing that quote unquote AI is doing today is it's got a better, or it is better at analyzing a large catalog of data than what the human brain is. So essentially to us, it appears to be like mind-blowing and kind of AI-ish because of what it's doing, like analyzing pictures or recognizing patterns, but it's not sentient in any way. Like it's not like I've seen a recent article where there's like a Google engineer that seems to think that the Google AI is sentient, and I'm sorry, I'm calling that guy full of shit, because the only thing that those AI quote unquote are doing, which I don't even like, after having numerous conversations and looking more into it, I wouldn't even call that like an actual AI, because when people say AI, they're thinking like a artificial general intelligence, like similar to what a human's intelligence, the capability of solving complex problems, and that really all, even when you see a quote unquote AI that's like creating an image or a 3D image, like based upon like if they're saying what is the optimum attractive male face, for example, if we're just like throw an example out there, today's,
I'll get closer to my camera so you can see it.
today's AI, in order to do that, you would have to feed it a ton of data of all, well, not even all, but like many thousands or even hundreds of thousands or possibly even millions of images of, like, say, male faces. And then you would have to input some sort of a algorithm for it to then analyze it and say what is a good feature versus a bad feature. And then, do you see where I'm going with this? Like, it's not, it doesn't have like when I, as a human male who isn't personally attracted to men, right? You can still get an idea of what you think based upon what you've seen throughout your experience in life of what society thinks is an attractive face for a male, the society you live in, obviously, versus what society thinks is not an attractive face for a male. And really, the quote unquote AI is doing kind of the same thing, but it's not doing it because of like its own social, like it doesn't have any way of being social, right? It doesn't have any way of going through high school and noticing that certain guys with a certain type of face get all the ladies, or we'll say, versus certain guys with a certain other type of face don't get the ladies, or a body type, and we're kind of simplifying this because obviously it's a very complex, all of this is very complex. All it's doing is just taking a shitload of images and then utilizing some sort of a algorithm that it's fed to determine what is the most attractive face. And then from there, like if it's told to recreate something, it would have to be told all of this, like everything it is doing, it has to be told to do that. So like we're not seeing yet today an actual artificial general intelligence where it can exist on its own and actually solve complex problems. Like there's no AI today that could like recreate calculus or something from scratch without being fed a ton of information. It's a machine that has a better capability of doing certain tasks, and
but requires programs and orders to do so.
right. So it is impressive. I'm not saying it's not impressive. It absolutely is. I'm just saying that a lot of people are misled because of buzzwords on what the buzzword AI in today's terms is actually doing. It's not doing it in the way that like a human would do that by any stretch of the the I guess term. It can't say come up with just you can't just like spin up an AI program or whatever, and that AI easily be able to, for example, go over and okay, so like on my desk here, for example, this is a really tough problem in the world of artificial intelligence. So like Boston Dynamics, I bet they can do it, but of course we're talking literally a decade or more of engineers trying to solve this problem. But like I can look down at this at my desk, and on my desk there's a spoon sitting there, and I can look down there, and then I can look up at the camera, and then I can go over and reach out and I can grab that spoon without looking at it. An AI couldn't do that today. I'm just saying, like, without it having to keep an image in its head or whatever in 3D space to go over and like reach out with an arm, or even if like say I didn't know what was to the right of me, I just can feel over here, oh, it's a bottle cap. You know what I mean? Like an AI couldn't do that. It's like a problem.
I getcha.
Yeah.
I getcha.
And we went on a tangent there, but it's an interesting discussion.
I didn't think that AI was that advanced, but I know like AI exists, but like what we see in sci-fi or in our video games that we play,
Yeah.
no, that's Oh, I know it's nowhere near that, because I mean that would take so much development and so much like software processing power for that to even be anywhere, probably even half that powerful.
Yeah, and the thing that's the biggest problem is that really an artificial general intelligence takes many different factors that we take for granted as a human brain. Like search is what Google does, right?
Right.
So like for us in like a concept, search would be, and we have to do it kind of like in a physical sense, but like let's say there wasn't the internet, search would be going up, I want to know this knowledge. So then like let's say we're in the world without the internet, I therefore need to first find what the book is of some expert, or like let's say it doesn't exist, like let's put it even farther back than that. How did Da Vinci, come up with these various metrics for determining like the light spectrum, or and he was wrong about flight, right? But he still was trying to devise experiments to try to figure out how flight works or whatever. So like that's what I'm saying is we, even in science, are building upon a body of knowledge, and later scientists like the Wright brothers were using kind of like those older experiments from Da Vinci, and then further and further, I don't know like the whole history of flight. I'm sure there was somebody after Da Vinci that figured another thing out, and then somebody after that figured another thing out, and then finally the Wright brothers were the ones that like actually flew for the first time. But I'm just saying
And
that
now we have airplanes.
right, and I'm just saying that AI most certainly would be like, to by today's standards, be just given that knowledge, so it's got a bit of a leg up. But regardless of that fact, if it were to be a case that we had just like a Google AI and it's fed nothing, it would have no metric or way of like getting to flight, right? Like it would never be able to solve that problem. Eventually we will have the capability, I think. It's all an engineering problem, just like the human body, and age and death is ultimately an engineering problem. But once again, that's like yet another problem that is many, we're all going to die before that's fixed. So I'm just saying, like, it's absolutely impressive, and there's some amazing things that like machine learning can do, but we're just not quite there. But we got on a long tangent there, and that's my bad. But it's something that I've looked a lot into, and it's very interesting. I recommend that people check out the Making Sense podcast with Sam Harris. There's at least 5 or 6 episodes I can think of from like actual engineers that specialize in our industry, pioneers in AI that he talks to on there. That's very interesting conversations. But I'm going to continue on with Margaret Hamilton there, because we're still talking about badasses from history, and she is one of them.
Isn't that the scene from Captain America Civil War?
What is that?
I see Robert Redford there in the background.
That's not Robert, or this guy? That is Robert Redford. I thought this was Tom Hanks. Is that Tom Hanks there?
That's Tom Hanks.
It's 100%
Say
Tom
that,
Hanks.
Yeah, that's Tom Hanks.
I was wondering about that as I was speaking about AI there. Welcome back, Mike.
What's up?
So,
I've been here for like 20 minutes.
So to continue on here, and this is a quote, what I think about when I think Margaret Hamilton is her quote that, quote within a quote, there was no choice but to be pioneers, end quote, within a quote. Because I think that really embodies who she was and her significance in this program. Muir Harmony says, she was a pioneer when it came to development of software engineering, and a pioneer as a woman in the workplace, contributing to this type of program, taking on this type of role. Then as now, most software engineers were male, but she never let that stand in her way. She has this mentality that there should be equal rights and equal access, and it wasn't about men and women. It was about people being able to pursue the kinds of jobs they want to pursue and take on the challenges they want to take on. She was also really expansive as a programmer, coming up with solutions for problems, very innovative, very outside of the box thinking that I think is reflected in her career choices and the work she did in the lab. In a bid to make software more reliable, Hamilton sought to design Apollo software to be capable of dealing with unknown problems and flexible enough to interrupt one task to take on a more important one. In her search for new ways to debug a system, she realized that sound could sense or serve as an error detector. Her program at Sage, she noted, sounded like a seahorse when it was running. Once she was awakened by a colleague who said her program no longer sounded like a seahorse. She rushed into work, eager to find the problem and to start applying this new form of debugging to her work. So this is a picture of a Lego set. That is, I'm sure that's Margaret Hamilton maybe there. I can't quite tell. Looks like it. Yeah, Hamilton. I
think
can
the black
barely
guy on
read
the
that.
other end is Margaret Hamilton.
That does not make sense whatsoever.
I know.
As a working mother, she took
Just
her
keeping
young.
you on your toes.
She took her mother. Angel Dust. I was just mentioning that earlier. There's a Google employee who said Google AI was sentient. I'm sorry, no, it's not. Like we don't have the technology or the engineering capability to create sentient AI. Like the only thing that the Google AI does is analyze pictures and is capable of looking through data to give you the best search possible. There's no search and analyze are only two aspects of intelligence. You need far more aspects of intelligence to create like a sentient being. But I'm going to continue here on this Margaret Hamilton thing here. And it looks like Lance is going to be up next with a really interesting subject. Let me.
But I can tell. I can tell you, Jason, though, from experience, machines can be possessed because I've seen some very crazy shit happen with my tech that I could not explain. And there was a time that my mom's phone just all of a sudden just talked on its own and would not respond to any of my mom's commands. And it was so bad to the point where I couldn't even fix it.
That just sounds like tech nowadays, dude. It always fucking up for no reason.
Well, I mean, it was so weird because, like, I guess my mom was driving back home from work one day, and she came in, and I could hear these weird noises. I heard these weird weird voices. What the fuck is that? That just walked in my house, and my mom's like, Dylan, you're something's wrong with my phone. I'm like, what's it doing? And it kept on talking on its own and like doing shit on its own, and I'm just like, is going on? And I tried to tap it and it wouldn't respond to me. It was so crazy.
So I want to, before we get on a tangent, I want to continue this Margaret Hamilton because we're on page 12 of 27. We need to get moving. So as a working mother, she took her young daughter to the MIT Instrumentation Laboratory with her at night and on weekends. One day, her daughter decided to play astronaut and pushed a simulator button that made the system crash. Hamilton realized immediately that the mistake was one that an astronaut could make, so she recommended adjusting the software to address it. But she was told astronauts are trained never to make a mistake. During Apollo 8's mission, moon orbiting flight, astronaut Jim Lovell made the exact same error that her young daughter had, and fortunately, Hamilton's team was able to correct the problem within hours. But for all future Apollo flights, protection was built into the software to make sure it never happened again. Over time, Hamilton began to view the whole mission as a system. Part is realized as software, part is peopleware, and part is hardware. Hamilton's work guided the remaining Apollo missions that landed on the moon, as well as benefiting Skylab, the first U.S. space station, in the 1970s. L4N I think that was a mistype. In 1972, she left MIT and started her own company, Higher Order Software. 14 years later, she launched another company, Hamilton Technologies, Inc. At her new firm, she created Universal Systems Language, another step in making the process of designing systems more dependable. NASA honored Hamilton with the NASA Exceptional Space Act Award in 2003, acknowledging her contributions to software developing and granting her biggest financial prize that the agency had ever awarded to one person until that time, $37,200. 2016, as we saw in this picture over here, President Barack Obama awarded her the Medal of Freedom, noting that her example speaks of the American spirit of discovery that exists in every little girl and every little boy who knew that somehow to look beyond the heavens is to look deep within ourselves. Hamilton's work may not be widely known to those outside the scientific community, though her achievements have been memorialized with the 2017 introduction of the Lego Margaret Hamilton action figure, which we saw here. It portrays Hamilton as a small, big-haired, bespectacled hero whose Apollo code stacked up to be taller than she was. The National Air and Space Museum now holds the prototypes for these action figures. Software engineers are not generally viewed as courageous action figures, but Hamilton is no stranger to the bravery required for heroism. She remembers being fearless even when the experts say, no, this doesn't make sense. They don't believe it. Nobody did. It was something that we were dreaming of happening, but it became real. And that moves us to Lance. You're up.
Before Lance goes up, I want to make one point to something you said a little earlier. You say we just didn't have the technology for something. Could it be assumed that we do have technology for anything? It just has not been invented yet.
Well, what came first, the chicken or the egg?
That's not what I mean.
I'd just say that you're saying, yeah, that's an impossibility, because you're saying like the technology already exists and we're just not utilizing the technology in such a way. But the way you said it, I'm just saying, like,
that's like saying smartphones existed in 500 BC, even though we had all of the components on Earth to make them, just nobody knew how to do it.
Yeah, kind of, but that's not exactly what I mean. This actually kind of bakes into the whole space thing going on with Margaret Hamilton. Something to the effect of, do you think there exists an element in the universe somewhere that is the answer to space travel that we just have not discovered yet?
Elementium.
Yes.
Elementium,
Yes,
I think, is a thing already. I think that the answer is just kind of staring us all in the face. And if Margaret Hamilton were alive yet today, we'd probably be closer to it.
Well, I mean, what's considered perfection to us is always under our noses. Like, so I agree with that. And God only knows what else is in the universe. I mean, it's forever expanding, and we've only just explored all of our solar system and a little bit beyond that, and then we got everything else going on out there that we don't even know. Like, we're not even sure if we're the only living beings in the entire universe. I mean,
most likely not, but
well,
we'll probably never meet any of them.
I'm gonna quote Neil deGrasse Tyson.
I bet you we can't be. I mean, again, it's the universe is ever expanding. There's several hundred planets that we probably haven't even discovered yet. So there's no way in hell. Yeah, there's absolutely no way in hell that we could not be the only living organisms in this entire universe. There's just no freaking way.
Just to quote Neil deGrasse Tyson, who, by the way, honorable mention for badasses of history, still alive today, was a stripper and now an astrophysicist, theoretical astrophysicist at that. I'm serious. He actually was a stripper at one point. Not kidding.
It's just funny.
It is funny. But to quote him, to say definitively that there is no life anywhere but Earth is like taking a cup of water from the ocean and saying there is no fish in the ocean.
Exactly.
Because of what you have in the cup.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yes, I very much agree with that.
All right, so Lance, let's move on to the next subject here, and try to keep it briefer than longer. I will just say that.
I could probably talk about this one for hours, but I won't. Alexander the Third, also known as Alexander the Great, probably everybody's heard of him, was born July 20th, 356 BC. He became king at the bright age of 20, where then he immediately took the entire Macedonian army, launched a 13-year conquest through the coastline along the Asia Minor, up into Afghanistan and into India. Up until that point, the Greeks did not know what was in India. They really hadn't been there. So what he did was he rode his armies up across the border of the Asia Minor, took all of the port cities, and then rode up into Afghanistan and defeated King Darius III's army at Galgamea. Sorry, I had to think of the name of that for a second. Now, in Galgamea, he defeated the Persian king, King Darius III. He defeated his entire army, sent him out running into the mountain. That gave him control of Babylon, one of the oldest cities in the world. Think it might still stand today. Now, what I want to kind of point out here is through this journey through, Asia Minor, up Afghanistan, modern day Iraq, all of that territory, he founded over 20 cities and named them all Alexandria. We don't know exactly how many of them because they don't all still stand today. But and give me a split second and I'll find the exact year.
It's been 8 split seconds.
It has not been 8 split seconds.
It sure has. Just depends how thinly you split them.
In 332 BC, he founded the one in Egypt, which is the biggest one that still stands today. It's got over 5 million people in it to this day. Now, there was a library there, and Jason mentioned it briefly earlier in the podcast about the Great Fire in Alexandria. It is believed that a good portion of ancient history was actually lost forever because of that Great Fire, which happened in 48 BC. Now, that was actually caused because Julius Caesar, the then emperor of Rome, dropped a candle in that library, and it went up into flame. So we can all blame Julius Caesar for that one.
Fuck that guy.
Yeah, fuck Julius Caesar.
I mean,
Him and Cleopatra.
I'll tell you what, dude. If I ever find Julius Caesar, I'm gonna fucking stab him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like 12 people beat me to it.
Well, you could always go to hell and turn on the Doom music and ask Satan where he's at.
Be gone,
Yeah.
Satan.
Alexandria is still in Egypt, and it has like 5 million people in it. It's one of the largest cities in the entire country of Egypt nowadays.
Good for them.
Now, one of the biggest, things that he did is he gave a speech. It's not really clear what year the speech was given, but after about 13 years of marching through all of these, they fought 52 battles in total to conquer everything. They conquered Persia. They united all the barbarian tribes from Macedon to India. They conquered everything. He gave a speech called the Opus Mutinus. His entire Greek army said that we're done. We're tired of fighting. We're going home. We don't want to do this no more. So he stood in front of his entire army and pretty much told them, I don't give a shit where you go. Go home. But I want you to know that you left your king here in Greece with the foreigners you conquered. I want you to go home and tell your wives that you left your king in India with the people you conquered. And I will take my Asians and I will continue to conquer. Is pretty much what he told them. He said, I eat what you eat, I sleep where you sleep. You know, I do the same thing you guys do. He pretty much treated him, he didn't think of himself as better than his men. He did the same thing. That's why I believe Alexander the Great made such a great leader in total, is because he led by example. He wasn't just some king ruling over his army. He was at the front of every battle line. During the speech, I believe he even said, "Show me your scars. I will strip naked and show you mine."
There you go.
You know, like he was, and apparently there, according to legend, there was a big emotional, kind of recoiling between him and his army. Like, they got real emotional, and everybody just kind of took a step back and was like, "Oh, he's right." He made us rich. He gave us just about everything we had. Took us from sheep
right.
farmers to now we rule half the world.
Okay.
Let's give this a look real quick. We got some supporting video here to kind of like say what what was his life and kind of in general what was his legend. So let's give this a look real quick.
Crash course. Love Crash Course.
So, quick biography of Alexander of Macedon. Born in 356 BCE, died in 323 BCE at the ripe old age of 32. Alexander was the son of King Philip II, and when just 13 years old, he tamed a horse no one else could ride named Bucephalus, which impressed his father so much that he said, "O thy son, look thee out at a kingdom equal to and worthy of thyself, for Macedonia is too little for thee." By that time, he was already an accomplished general, but over the next decade, he expanded his empire with unprecedented speed, and he is famous for having never lost a battle. Today, we're going to look at...
By the way, this presentation is by Crash Course on YouTube. Be sure to give them a like and a subscribe. They do an excellent job. I've seen a few of their other videos.
Alexander of Macedon's story by examining 3 possible definitions of greatness. First, maybe Alexander was great because of his accomplishments. This is an extension of the idea that history is the record of the deeds of great men. Now, of course, that's ridiculous. For one thing, half of people are women. For another, and this is important, there are lots of historical events that no one can take responsibility for, like, for instance, the Black Plague. Still, Alexander was accomplished. I mean, he conquered a lot of territory, like, a lot. His father Philip had conquered all of Greece, but Alexander did what the Spartans and the Athenians had failed to do. He destroyed the Persian Empire. He conquered all the land the Persians had held, including Egypt, and then marched toward India, stopping at the Indus River only because his army was like, "Hey, Alexander, you know what would be awesome? Not marching." Also, Alexander...
Exactly. That's actually...
Not marching.
That's a good point.
Alexander was a really good general.
Yeah, I mean, they
I'm gonna pay you to sit on your ass.
Although historians disagree over whether his tactics were truly brilliant or if his army just happened to have better technology, specifically these extra long spears called sarissas. But much of his reputation as a general and his reputation in general, anybody? Puns? Maybe I should stop? Okay. Is because of Napoleon. Napoleon, like many other generals through the millennia, was obsessed with Alexander the Great, but more on that in a moment. That said, Alexander wasn't very good at what we might now call empire.
He was? I thought he was short.
Yep. Nope. He was average height for a man in France at his time period. He was depicted in many ways that made him look larger than other people, and that kind of took on a life of its own, i.e. a meme of its own, where people thought he was, what word am I thinking of here? Like, when a dude with a tiny dick drives a huge truck.
An egotistic?
Overcompensating.
Overcompensation. Yeah.
Empire building. Alexander's empire is definitely visually impressive, but it wasn't actually much of an empire. Like, Alexander specialized in the tearing down of things, but he wasn't so great at the building up of institutions to replace the things he'd torn down. And that's why pretty soon after his death, his empire broke into 3 empires called the Hellenistic kingdoms. Each was ruled by one of Alexander's generals, and they became important dynasties. The Antigonids in Greece and Macedonia, the Ptolemies in Egypt, the Seleucids in Persia, all of which lasted longer than Alexander's empire itself. A second kind of greatness, maybe Alexander was great because he had an enormous impact on the world after his...
I thought he was going to say penis, but...
death. Like King Tut, Alexander the Great was amazingly good at being a dead person. Let's go to the thought bubble. So after Alexander of Macedon died, everyone, from the Romans to Napoleon to Oliver Stone, loved him, and he was an important military model for many generals throughout history, but his main post-death legacy may be that he introduced the Persian idea of absolute monarchy to the Greco-Roman world, which would become a pretty big deal. Alexander also built a number of cities on his route that became big deals after his death, and it's easy to spot them because he named most of them after himself, and one after his horse. The Alexandria in Egypt became a major center of learning in the classical world and was home to the most amazing library ever, which Julius Caesar probably accidentally burned down while trying to conquer a bunch of land to emulate his hero, Alexander the Great. Plus, the dead Alexander had a huge impact on culture. He gave the region its common language, Greek, which facilitated conversations and commerce. Greek was so widespread that archaeologists have found coins in what is now Afghanistan with pictures of their kings with the word king written beneath the pictures in Greek. This is also why, incidentally, the New Testament was eventually written in Greek. Although Alexander was mostly just conquering territory for the glory and heroism and greatness of it all, in his wake emerged a more closely connected world that could trade and communicate with more people more efficiently than ever before. Alexander didn't make those things happen, but they probably wouldn't have happened without him. But here's a question. If you're watching Jersey Shore and get so involved in the situation's romantic conquest that you leave the bathwater running, thereby flooding your apartment, and you have to call a plumber, and the plumber comes over and you fall in love with him and get married and live happily ever after, does that make the situation responsible for your marriage? Thanks, Thought Bubble. Okay, a third definition of greatness. Maybe Alexander is great because of his legend. Since no accounts of Alexander were written while he was alive, embellishment was easy.
Yeah, I've seen that.
This machine kills fascists.
I noticed that at the beginning of the video, dude.
I didn't notice
And maybe
that
that's where
until
true
now.
greatness lies. I mean, the guy died at 32 before he ever had a chance to get old and lose battles. He was tutored by Aristotle, for God's sakes. Then there's Alexander's single-minded, obsessive, Ahab-esque pursuit of the Persian king Darius, who he chased across modern-day Iraq and Iran for no real reason except that he desperately wanted to kill him. And when Bessus, one of Darius's generals, assassinated him before Alexander had the chance, Alexander chased Bessus around until he could at least kill him. These almost comical pursuits of glory and heroism are accompanied in classical histories by stories of Alexander walking through the desert and it's suddenly raining and these ravens coming to lead him to the army he's supposed to fight, and stories of his hot Persian wife Roxana, who while still a teenager engineered the assassination of many of Alexander's fellow wives. And even in his death, people tried to make Alexander live up to this heroic ideal. Like Plutarch tells us that he died of a fever, but that's no way for a masculine, empire-building, awesome person to die. So rumors persist that he died either of alcohol poisoning or else of assassination-y poisoning. I mean, no great man can die of a fever. Speaking of great men, it's time to strip down for the open letter.
All right, so that is it for that video.
2 points I want to make. First, that bit about how it suddenly rained in the desert and that crows followed his army or led them to battle. The first one, not likely. Possible coincidence. It does rain in the desert occasionally. But the crows leading his army to battle is not so far-fetched. It's actually believed by some ornithologists that birds like carrion birds and birds of prey will see an army and realize, oh, there's going to be a battle, and that means fresh corpses. So they will fly with that army to meet the other army.
I have heard
It
that as
makes
well.
sense. Yeah, it's like ringing the dinner bell.
Kinda, yeah. Except this dinner bell sounds like millions of marching feet in Clash of Sword on Shield. Which, that sound just sounds wonderful. Second point I wanted to make.
It's the sound of metal.
It is indeed. But the second point I wanted to make, Alexander the Great is just held on such a high pedestal for conquering, for taking the land that he truly believed belonged to him and making it something completely new. What is Christopher Columbus hated for?
The same thing.
Precisely.
No, Alexander the Great. I'm sorry about my camera. I don't know out of the thing right now. I don't know if I need to be added, but Alexander the Great didn't take the land because he believed it was his. His ultimate goal was to unify and bring civilization. Like, really, what he conquered were all these barbaric tribes, the Tibilians, the Thracians. All of these people didn't have the aspect of society. He believed he was doing them a huge favor by bringing them. It was the spread of the Hellenistic culture throughout the Eastern world.
Firstly,
Well, and
Christopher
and not
Columbus had the
only
same idea for the Native Americans. Secondly, they knew nothing about India, which you said yourself.
Yeah.
India could have been a paradise of technology, and they knew nothing about it, but they marched to conquer it anyway.
Well, the story is like he wanted his father wanted to go to India and never made it because he died.
Fair point.
And he went to India because his father never could, and he didn't like his father much. He thought of his father as a drunk, as pretty much a blubbering old man, and he wanted to be better than his father, like I guess every son did. King Philip II, who only conquered Greece. He wanted to surpass his father in not only name but image.
Well, and not only that, but Christopher Columbus also didn't do this for the sake of discovery. Didn't do it, just for the sake of his own will or for his own glory. It was a prison sentence by I can't remember which queen that he served under at the time, and not to mention he even lied to the queen saying that he discovered India because that's where the Indian and Native American confusion comes from. Native Americans are not Indians; they're Native Americans. Indians come from India, and that's the reason why that there's so much confusion, and not to mention a lot of controversy behind Columbus Day because he was looked at as a hero when actually he was a lying coward because he didn't want to lose his head.
Yeah, I can believe that.
Yay, Lance is back.
Okay. Yeah, I left video and I came back in, and there we go.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's fine. So
But
that was a neat little segment there on Alexander the Great, but we're going to move on to what Dylan's got. What do you got for us, Dylan? You just lost again. Lance, you're killing me.
Going on.
You're killing me, man. Just keep going, Dylan.
No problem.
Is going to have to figure his stuff out.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about the Shaolin. Now, unlike the other subjects that we covered, the subjects were based on one person. I wanted to focus on just the society of the Shaolin in general, because not to mention, I don't know if there was any famous Shaolin monks per se. I mean, maybe there was a famous one or two, but the thing is because of the way that they live and how they view life in general, I don't think fame really meant much to a Shaolin. So, without further ado, the Shaolin, one of the most ancient societies in the entire world, and are also globally renowned for their inner peace-seeking way of life and their art of combat, commonly known as Kung Fu. The Shaolin are often looked at as pacifists because of the religious teachings and way of life which comes from Buddhism, which is a life without any conflict with others, or especially, and this is more about inner peace, but they also don't want conflict with other people as well because they feel that it's just pointless to be doing that when you can just make peace with one another. So with that said, to make without living life without any conflict with others and with oneself and helping those because it is simply the right thing to do. But do not let this fool you. As the old saying goes, don't ever mistake kindness for a weakness because the Shaolin are also one of the most feared warriors in world history, and they have the deadliest martial art known to man that many combatants, professional fighters especially, avoid. The biggest, strongest fighters, big muscles and all of them, no, they will shy away from it. They'll no. If mention Shaolin monk, no, they're going to stay away, and there's a reason. Yeah, the Shaolin like many Far East cultures of Asia, were very secluded from the rest of the world until they were discovered. Now, I don't know. Now, I think there were some Asian provinces that chose to be secluded, and then there was some that were just simply secluded because they just, were just minding their own business. But however, majority of Asian provinces were known to the rest of the world because they were discovered. So I want to make that clear real quick. They were secluded from the rest of the world until they were discovered. Despite the Shaolin being a very ancient society, they were actually first discovered by Western civilization in the mid 20th century. To be more specific, I want to say the 1960s, which led to having influence on what we see in pop culture, like our video games, our TV shows, and our movies. However, Hollywood has twisted the perception of what the actual meaning of Kung Fu is and its purpose, as well as martial arts as a whole. And that has been a really huge trend back in the late 20th century. There was a lot of movies that had to do with Far East martial arts that made the martial arts look like it was only made to kill, to shed blood, like Bloodsport or Enter the Dragon featuring Bruce Lee. Martial arts is not like that at all. It is not. It is culturally, it is very inaccurate, and actually a lot of it, especially the Japanese, they get very offended by that, as a matter of fact. With that said, the Shaolin emphasizes self-control and using violence only as a last resort when other options of conflict of resolution fail. And that's very common in all martial arts. Especially in the martial arts I took about 5 years of Tang Soo Do, 4 years of Taekwondo, and a couple of months of Jiu-Jitsu, but I quit Jiu-Jitsu early because the trainer was dumb and the team was a bunch of macho men. But we were taught though is to never resort to violence first thing. That should be your very last option. Do not ever look for a fight. Don't ever look for trouble. That is not what martial art is about. It's about sharpening one's mind and disciplining one's spirit and soul and making you a better leader and a better warrior when the time comes to it. The training to become a full-fledged monk takes many years, as well as learning and understanding and memorizing all passages from the Book of Mantras, which there are 200 passages, by the way. That's a lot. A couple of very little known facts about Kung Fu is that Kung Fu is actually called Wushu. And these Chinese martial arts specifically used to have over 1,500 forms of Wushu. But many of those in China have been outlawed in China due to the dangers of the techniques, because some of the techniques like the white like kumite, that's like Mortal Kombat kind of shit. Like there's like a spine breaking move. There's one there's like if you hit them in a pressure point right here in the nasal and this like cartilage right here, a piece of it goes up your nose so hard that it penetrates your brain and kills you. Like it's deadly. No, like there are some martial arts that are literally made to kill, but not all are like that though. Just so we're clear. So because of that, they have been outlawed in China due to the dangers of the techniques and also because of the political atmosphere in China. The Shaolin monks do have cold weapons themselves, aside from their hand-to-hand combat. They use staves, they use whip chains, or my personal favorite, the twin hook swords. And why I like the twin hook swords is because if you look at the twin hook swords here, Jason, can you pull that up by any chance?
I'll just do a search.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so what makes these swords so unique and why I favor these out of the cold weapons that the Shaolin use is because number one, they're dual wield. Not many swords can pull off a dual wield because usually they're made for just to be held, just held with one sword with one hand, unless it's and then there's some swords that require two hands. But this thing is so cool because number one, the hooks can be used to tear flesh, and it can also be used to grab someone's shoulder. You can hook them and bring them in, and what these little crescent-shaped things on the handles are, you could actually punch and do slicing damage at the same time. And hold on, I haven't got the best part yet. On the bottom of the hilts, those are blades that you can force for CQC, or close range, close quarters combat, stab right there. And this is what I call like the ultimate form of the twin hook swords. The reason why that they're designed this way is if you take the two hooks on the end, you can interlink them together, and they can swing it around and use that blade that's on the bottom of the hilt, and it can slit a person's throat like butter.
Dang.
It's deadly. And I don't know if you guys heard this show, but there was a show called The Deadliest Warrior. And the Shaolin monks were featured in one of the episodes, and they went up against this Hawaiian tribe called the Maui Indians. And they what they do is like they research their origins, and they research the weapons that they use, their way of life, how they fight, and like the twin hook swords, like they actually test the weapons themselves on like carcasses and cadavers, like fake artificial, I should say.
Yeah.
And those, holy crap, that shit, battle ready twin hooks. I pray I never have to taste one of those, because those things will go right through you, like no kidding. And that's very common for most Far East weapons, because like the katana, the renowned samurai bread and butter sword, that shit cuts through easy because they curve their blades. And the twin hook sword is no exception either. And not only that, again, it's dual wield. It's got multiple blades for multiple purposes. And if you interlink them, you got a medium range weapon that you can just swing around, and you can just cause serious slash damage. And and needless to say, the Shaolin completely annihilated the Maui Indian, because the Maui Indian had their weapons were easily countered, and the Shaolin monks are too skilled, they're too fast, and their martial arts skills just made the Maui Indians look like they were just, I don't know, some weak white belt fighter. So anyways, yeah, it was very interesting. And yeah, and there's actually so many types of weapons. Like they use like hammers, they like certain cudgels. They also use spears as well. Like they use all types of weapons. And not to mention, the Far East in general are renowned for having very highly efficient, very deadly cold weapons. That's what they're known for. And that's why a lot of ancient armies at the time, like the Mongolians or the Chang dynasty or the Mughals, they were like one of the most feared armies in existence, because they knew how to make their weapons sharp and efficient, and the way that they were raised as warriors, they will kill you without a second thought, because it is dishonorable to not fight for your empire.
Did you just say Mughals?
Yes, there was a Far Eastern ancient tribe called the Mughals, and they were powerful. They weaponized elephants. They invented armor for elephants that were basically modern at their time tanks, and they cut part of their tusk off and replace it with these spikes that can easily gore a person that happens to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. And you thought Alexander the Great was and his army were strong. I want to see him go against the Mughals, because those Mughals, they were savages. They knew no fear. They know no pain, and they've won a lot of battles.
The thing I know about Mughals is that they are a race in Final Fantasy of tiny little cat, bear, bat creature.
Look.
Yeah. Not the same thing.
Kupo.
Yeah, sure you don't mean Kupo. Kupo, absolutely.
Kupo?
But
Gotta have that Kupo.
Are you sure you don't mean Mongols?
We did have a BBC kind of mini documentary on a final test to become a Shaolin master, but we're getting close on time. So we shall move, and thank you for that presentation, to satanic or catonic, excuse me.
Satanic.
Yeah. And we're gonna go and talk about another lady pirate. So let's go ahead and move over to that.
Also from China.
Seems to be a common theme. Far Eastern and pirates tonight. But Qing Xing, not much is really known about her really early life because she was kind of found as by a pirate captain at the age of 16 when he destroyed her village. She was a prostitute and he took her on as one of his wives. Well, a few years later, when he died, she pretty much forcefully clawed her way up to power and became, the captain of this crew. But instead of just sailing and doing like the typical pirate thing, what she did was she diplomatically combined all of the pirate crews of China and Asia and got as many people together as she possibly could and ran it. The closest thing I can think of is the mafia. She was huge on extortion. She would pretty much, tell all the villages, be like, hey, you pay me this, I won't raid your village. Okay, all the ships that I find on sea, fair game. But by doing this, she had 1,800 ships and 80,000 pirates under her command. As well as she also gave women equal rights because obviously she was a woman. So the typical pirate, raping a woman was beheading immediately. It was absolutely forbidden for any of her men to do. She just didn't allow it.
Right.
But she extorted all of these villages. And then when the Portuguese and the British both sent their navies and armadas after her, she beat the fuck out of them. Dude, sent them all back home. And the only way that they could actually get her to stop ruling the China Sea, which is what she did, she owned the China Sea. And there was nobody that could take it from her. Is they offered her and her entire army a full pardon if she just walked away. Just
Crazy.
stopped, keep all of your treasure. We will no longer pursue you. Nobody gets any charges. Just please stop. Is essentially what the British and the Portuguese told her. So she walked away, a very rich lady, very rich, and started a gambling house in China and died at like 62.
So there's actually a very brief but funny kind of video that Comedy Central did on this badass of history. So we'll give that a quick look, and then we'll get to the very last badass of history for the evening. So let's give this a look real quick.
Oh, hi. I'm just finishing it.
Am I late?
No, you're right on time. Qing Shi, the pirate queen of the Red Flag Fleet and overall killing machine.
And the baddest bitch in history.
Yeah.
Qing Shi is a prostitute turned pirate bride. She marries the feared Chang Yi, and together they're partners in ravaging the Chinese coast.
We raid the shit out of those villages, killing all in our path.
I knew I should have worked at Broad City.
After my husband dies, I take charge of the fleet. I command over 80,000 pirates and 1,200 ships with an iron fist.
And with a very strict behavioral policy. If you stole from the group,
beheading!
If you disobeyed orders,
beheading!
If you married a female pirate.
Oh, come on, man, I just got this job.
You must be faithful to her.
I mean, it is true. She beheaded people for nothing.
Yeah.
I was the most powerful pirate in the world. Anyone who tried to defeat me met their end by the end of my sword.
Yeah, real bad stuff.
But soon, I lose the taste for blood. The government granted me and my merry gang amnesty rather than face us in battle. And I accepted. I get to keep my money and go into retirement.
What does a retired pirate do?
Whatever the fuck I want.
Boats and hoes, that's
Ching Shi
what.
opens her own casino and lives to be an old badass bitch. Guess the lesson here is quit while you're ahead.
Ahead? Really? I'm offended.
Well, there you go.
Inaccuracy I noticed in there. Once
funny.
you behead somebody, they can't scream.
I mean, yeah.
Fair enough.
Just saying.
Fair enough. You had to be that way.
Definitely.
So, and this is the last badass of history, but this is recent history. We're going to talk about Mr. Bob Ross, or an actual
May he rest in peace.
Robert Norman Ross. A wholesome badass of history. So this is not the same kind of warmongering badass that we've been talking about most of this evening. And of course, I guess Margaret Hamilton wasn't a warmongering badass, but I'm just saying this guy is a badass because he just wanted to, and continuing my theme that I mentioned earlier, he wanted to just make the world a better place. And really, rarely, if ever, well, he did make probably some money on a few paintings, but he rarely made any money on his works. So let's look into this. So he was born October 29th, 1942. And I'm just actually looking here. Yeah. I actually pulled up the wrong picture there. So this is a young Bob Ross, I believe, over here with the glasses on. He was born October 29th, 1942 in Daytona Beach, Florida. He was an American painter and television personality whose popular PBS television show The Joy of Painting made him a household name, and as a painting teacher to the masses. So like I mentioned before, he was raised in Orlando, Florida. After completing 1 year of high school and working for a time as a carpenter with his father, Ross enlisted at the age of 18 into the United States Air Force while stationed in Alaska. He took his first painting class at the United States Organization Club in the early 1960s. However, he learned the technique that would make his career, the wet-on-wet a la prima oil painting technique, from television painting instructor Bill Alexander, whose show The Magic of Oil Painting aired on PBS from 74 to 82. So let's give this a quick look, because it might look very similar.
See, deep, 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 deep. See, just work like that, always from the dark into the light. And then the white from the canvas get into your brush, and you get lighter, lighter, lighter up there. And then you can make your own figures, whatever you want. You can create trees there. You can have it just as a meadow.
So I'm going to mute him real quick and just check him out in the background. So the wet-on-wet technique involved applying oil paint on top of still wet oil paint rather than waiting between layers for the paint to dry. This allowed the composition to be completed quickly, which made the technique particularly suitable for the half-hour television program structure. So he painted prolifically while serving in the military and sold paintings of the Alaskan landscape to tourists. So let's check out one of his original paintings, which actually was on a gold pan. So this is one of Bob Ross's original paintings that he would paint for troops out in Alaska. Kind of interesting.
Oh, the Northern Lights.
So in 1981, he retired from the military and sought out private painting lessons with that gentleman, Mr. Bill Alexander, eventually taking the place and proving much more successful than his teacher on PBS. The Joy of Painting premiered in 1983 and ran for 11 years. So let's give a look to the most popular Bob Ross episode on YouTube, racking up a massive 40 stinking million views.
40 million. That's
40
that's a chunk.
million views on this that we are watching right here. We'll listen
That's
to
like so.
It's like 30 million cheeseburgers,
and
dude.
trees and happy little things that live here in our world. All right.
just amazing.
Okay. Shoot.
Look
We
at all
had
them
such a
happy little
place that I'd
trees.
have to go fishing there. I like to fish. But I'm not a very good fisherman. I catch a little fish and take the hook carefully out of his mouth and put a Band-Aid on him, a little CPR, and pat him on the tutu and put him back in the water and go back and catch him again another day. But we'd have to have a way to get up here if we was going to catch that fish. It would take a little of the Van Dyke Brown.
Van Dyke Brown, dude. I'm telling you.
I never took
We had to
I
walk
never
on
took
through
him as
bushes,
someone that
mosquitoes would get us,
enlisted in
so
the military. He acts so
let's have us a little path
serene.
that we can walk
Yeah.
back in here and catch that big old
So I'm just
crab
going to mute
bass
this
one.
here and continue on with the little segment. So Ross, as you can hear there, he projected a lovable hippie persona, sporting a permed afro and denim shirts, and jeans, and a soothing and intimate speaking voice that made the viewer feel as if it were a personal one-on-one painting lesson. He also amazed viewers with his effortless painting method, creating detailed landscapes over the course of 30 minutes. With the help of a house painting brush and a palette knife, chatting and offering words of encouragement as he painted. Over the years, his folksy approach and references to happy little trees and clouds endeared him further to his fans. Ross went on to market his painting technique and established a hugely successful Bob Ross Inc., selling instructional books, videos, and a line of art supplies, and offering painting workshops with teachers trained in his method, all of which continued to be profitable into the current century, So he died of lymphoma, unfortunately, at the age of 52. But it doesn't end there. That's not the end of the story. Like, I know that he has since passed away, but let's hear on. So, interest in Ross has had a resurgence in the 21st century with the availability of the joy of painting on such streaming platforms as YouTube, which we're watching there in the background. In 2020, the Smithsonian acquired 2 of Ross's paintings as well as his easel, palette, and brushes and other objects related to the joy of painting for the American History Museum in Washington, D.C. The same year Bob Ross Experience opened in Muncie, Indiana, where his show had been filmed. The museum included his studio and offered various workshops. And we'll check out this made-for-television little kind of interview and bit here as the conclusion of our Badasses of History podcast today. So let's give this a look.
The pandemic forced many of us to shelter inside, and as we did, millions turned to an old friend for comfort and inspiration. Here's Lee Cowan.
Welcome back. I'm glad you could join me today.
Bob Ross, with his curious hair and his whisper of a voice.
In our world here, there lives a happy little mountain.
He was perhaps an unlikely TV celebrity.
Here's a happy little bush. He lives right there.
That's the famous one right there.
But he became one of America's most famous painters, not only for his creativity, but for his positivity.
We don't make mistakes. We have happy accidents.
It was like watching a magician reveal the secret of his trade.
Look at that. Isn't that a nice little tree?
But at the height of his fame, at only 52, Bob Ross died of lymphoma.
So did Bob Ross ever
That was
paint like happy
26
little
years
titties like every other artist did?
I'm just
I don't believe so. He was a
I'm
very
just imagining somebody finds a hoard of Bob Ross's unreleased works, and like some of them are like hentai.
he was a very religious man. I'll just say that.
ago. And yet, the happy little painter is
religious.
perhaps more relevant now than ever.
We've been in a time
It
where
would be an awesome
things
youth
have been so
pastor.
frantic and people have been so stressed, and Bob Ross is the king of chill.
But what
No
many may
kidding.
not know is that when Bob Ross came into our
envious.
homes all those years ago, he did it from a home. This one in Muncie, Indiana.
Nobody really thinks about where the show was made.
So many people are surprised. They walk in and they're like, this is not a TV studio. This is a living room. Yeah, it's a living room.
They basically just took an old house and
Jessica
made it
Jenkins is curator of that living room, what is now the Bob Ross Experience.
Oh, wow.
At Muncie's Minnetrista Museum.
Be brave.
This very spot is where for years the joy of painting was taped. Those are his paintbrushes, his palette, and of course, his easel.
Every episode, he would have a moment where he would beat the devil out of the brush, and he would take it and he would just thump, 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 thump.
And just beat the devil out of it.
People come in and they recognize that. They know exactly what that is.
But why
Why'd they have
Muncie?
to clean it off, though?
Well, because this was the home of the local PBS station. Traveling through the Midwest on a teaching tour, Ross approached the station with the idea of teaching in front of a camera.
He was an unknown painter, though, at the time, right? Nobody knew who Bob Ross was.
They did not know who he was, but he had a lot of charm.
Jim Needham was WIPB's general manager, and he knew Ross had something.
His mantra was, I'll never do anything harder than my audience is able also to do.
Even if this is your first seascape, you'll have some super, super results.
It wasn't really just about painting. The show was about a lot more than that.
I think the show is about giving the...
So when I was pre-watching this, do you think that guy sounded like he was kind of about to cry right there?
A little.
I'm
It
just
did.
saying, he was very moved.
I noticed that. It looked like he was about to cry, and
Okay.
it's hard to say that this isn't actually kind of a moving thing.
I mean, it
really
is. It is. I'm just saying. I wanted to point that out, that Bob
Or
Ross,
is this just-
he has that effect on people.
Yeah, it's his energy. Like I said, just how can you serve in the military, and then you're so calm like that? Like he doesn't have a worry in the world. Like
I want to
I'm
see.
so
I heard
envious.
something about that. Actually,
I was going to say, I
sorry,
want
go
to see a parody or something where there's like Bob Ross, military man. He just like snaps a commie's neck, and then it's like it's a happy little accident.
Happy little accident.
Oopsie, and I don't know. Maybe he takes his combat knife and just slashes it. Beat the
He's
devil
like
out of
Mr.
it.
Rogers.
Beat the devil out of it.
He's like Mr. Rogers, but with talent.
Well, Mr. Rogers had talent for other things, but that's a story for another night. I honestly, I'd heard a story about Bob Ross in the military that he was actually a gunnery sergeant at one point, and he had to shout and yell, and post-army or something of that nature, he had said, it just wasn't me to be like that, and he vowed to never ever yell again.
Wow, I absolutely could believe that. He is a
Yeah.
very soft-spoken guy.
He is.
Person's
How?
agency and
I
doing
can't
what they
picture it
want
in
to
my
do or
head.
doing
I'm
something
trying.
they were afraid to do. And I'm not talking about painting.
How?
I'm talking about life.
Ross practiced his TV paintings for days, making sure that he could complete them in front of a camera in less than half an hour.
Maybe back in here.
He was very planned out and very methodical.
But it sure didn't come off that way. It came off very spontaneous and
Yeah.
calm. It wasn't like he was racing through
That's the thing about Bob. You know that on the inside, he was on a speed clock getting through that painting, but on the outside, he was just so relaxed and made it look so easy.
I'm just tapping here right along the bottom
Part of the Bob Ross experience is trying your hand at painting.
We go like
myself included.
Oh, just a little.
to get a little bit on it.
I see. So everybody needs a little friend.
For certified Bob Ross instructor Doug Hallgren, that discovery that anyone can do it is the real joy of painting.
Sometimes we grab their hand and we go, it's going to be okay. We're going to do this together. Just trust me on this. And they're like, oh, it worked. Nice.
That did come together. I'm pleased with it.
Your trees,
amazing.
especially.
Even mine was recognizable as something. It was a remarkable ego boost for everyone here.
After sitting down and painting a painting, I really believe I could do anything.
His simplicity, though, often brought criticism.
What did the art world think of him in general?
The art world had mixed reviews. There were certainly a lot of people who categorized him as kitsch art. But if you look at the canvases that Bob did on his own time for himself, they are complex.
Like this one, for example, an elaborate seascape that hung in his own home.
The later he got on in years, those paintings just got sharper and sharper and sharper.
Bob Ross rarely made a dime off any of his paintings, and he never expected any of his work to ever hang in a museum. But recently, the Smithsonian acquired 4 Bob Ross paintings to add to its permanent collection.
Now then, look right here.
In that, at least, the man who just wanted to paint a happy little world has cemented his place in it as well.
The message of having self-confidence, of trying new things, that doesn't get old. And because of that, I think that it just continues to resonate for generation after generation.
So from all of us here, I'd like to wish you happy painting. God bless.
Just saying, a total badass of history, and in just a different way. Like, you don't have to go on a murderous rampage in order to be a badass of history. You can be a very wholesome and just moving person like Mr. Ross.
In a world full of murderous, rampaging people, we need people like Mr. Ross.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we really do.
Absolutely.
And
Well,
even when he was at his lowest, he would not stop trying to make other people happy.
And I'm just going to reiterate, like, that is one of the main reasons that I picked the couple people that I did my first. If you're just kind of joining us a little bit later, my first was Nikola Tesla, who really just wanted to make the world better and, did not make much money from his outrageous and amazing achievements. And same thing with Mr. Ross there. He just wanted to make in even the smallest way, if he would have only changed one person, he would have been glad. He wanted to make a better world and was not looking for fame and was not looking for money.
Which is different.
That's what we need more of in this day and age, for sure. But
it's different than both of my selections. They both got famous and were extremely wealthy by the time they were done.
For sure. All right. Well, that is our episode. We went a little bit, looks like 18 minutes longer than what we usually intend. We try to typically be somewhat done around the 11:30 mark Central Standard Time. But Mike, do you have any final thoughts?
Well, just to kind of continue the talk of Bob Ross a little bit, a fairly well-known quote from him that I've committed to memory because it's just so moving. You got to have opposites, dark and light, light and dark in painting. Just like in life, you got to have a little sadness once in a while, just so you know when the good times come. I'm waiting on those good times now.
Me too.
Katana,
That was a quote that he made shortly after the death of his wife.
Katana, any final thoughts?
I really did appreciate all the badasses today. I learned quite a bit. I think there was a mixture. Like, there was a few absolute murderous badasses that just did badass things and changed the world for better or worse. however you want to take it. And then you had some of the ones that you might have chosen, or Margaret
Hamilton. Yep.
Hamilton, sorry.
Margaret Hamilton. Yeah,
You
you
know,
got it right.
who was an absolute badass that used their mind and did badass things with their mind and not so physical, and just helped the world with that, like Nikola Tesla. And you know, it was
Yeah.
kind of a mixture.
Sure. All right, Dylan, what you got?
Well, I'm definitely not looking at Bob Ross the same, because I didn't realize that he had that kind of power, I guess, that kind of energy. And I never took him for someone that was, that served the country. But like I said, it's just majority of veterans that I've met, if not pretty much all of them, they've had some sort of trauma, and it's changed them, because of the stuff that they experienced. And then we got Bob Rosser. He's just, it's like nothing, like he's never, he just goes on about his painting in his daily life like he's never suffered any lick of pain ever in his life. But he truly has, of course. But
yeah,
geez, as someone that struggles with mental health every single freaking day, I always wonder how people like that just do that. How do you do that?
They're gems. Definitely. All right. Well, I've already said my final thoughts about Mr. Ross, and also about, the late Mr. Tesla. But I just wanted to switch to the audience real quick. If this is content that you like, please consider liking, sharing, following, subscribing if you're watching us on the post edit on YouTube. And as always, thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.
Don't forget to wash those balls.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. This has been a fun one.
Don't tell me how to live my fucking life.
I figured you were the type that wouldn't.
Thanks, everybody. This has been a fun one. We'll catch you on the next one.